Chapter 1. The Auction. The clamor of voices in the auction room was a blur, an irritating buzz I couldn't shake off. My gaze was fixed on it, the painting that had haunted my dreams for weeks. A medium-sized canvas framed in ancient gold depicting an ostensibly benign countryside landscape. Yet, it radiated an aura of mystery that irresistibly drew me in. The colors, vivid and vibrant, stood in stark contrast to the gloomy atmosphere of the room. This wasn't my first auction of this kind, surrounded by family and friends who shared my passion. But that evening felt different. I was drawn to that aura of decay permeating every object, every single relic of the past. And in that painting there was something that both disturbed and fascinated me. The auction moved quickly, a succession of crystal goblets, ancient jewelry, and rusted armors. Finally, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. The auctioneer introduced my object of desire. The description was vague, almost whispered, as if fearing to disturb some ancient balance. A painting of unknown origin, he said in a husky voice. A landscape hiding a mystery that might engulf even the most reckless of buyers. My imagination ran wilder than ever, dreaming of walking in that landscape, feeling the wind among the trees, the scent of fresh grass. Its call was commanding. A shiver ran down my spine, but I didn't flinch. That painting had to be mine. It was as if it called to me, as if it had chosen me. The competition was fierce, but in the end, I prevailed. The hammer's fall marked my victory, and a sense of triumph, mixed with a hint of unease, took hold of me. The drive home was enveloped in an unusual silence. My thoughts were all for the painting, for that landscape that seemed so peaceful, yet charged with a silent anticipation. As soon as I crossed the threshold of my home, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. The Arrival. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I placed the painting on the easel I had prepared earlier, in the room I had designated for my most precious works. It was a beautiful countryside landscape, a place that should have evoked tranquility. Lush trees under a blue sky, a small village in the distance, and golden fields stretching to the horizon. As I observed the painting, I was overtaken by a strange sensation. It was as if the colors vibrated with a life of their own, hiding something just beneath the surface. The village, with its tiny houses, and the church with its sharp steeple, seemed to watch me, waiting. And the trees, there was something odd about the trees. They seemed too dense, too dark, as if they hid secrets no human eye was meant to discover. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of those absurd fantasies. It was just a painting after all. A piece of art I had longed for and now possessed. I decided not to let strange sensations spoil my enjoyment and, with a sigh, walked away to prepare myself a drink, hoping the warmth of a good drink would melt the inexplicable chill inside me. But that night, as I lay in bed, sleep was slow to come. My mind kept returning to the painting, to its overly vivid colors, to the sensation of barely perceptible movement, as if the landscape changed when no one was looking. And in the dead of night, a thought crept into me, a wild and impossible idea. What if the painting was truly alive? What if those changes I thought I perceived weren't a figment of my imagination? With that thought, I fell asleep, unaware that those questions would find their answers soon enough, in ways I could never have imagined. Chapter 3. The Early Days. Upon waking, the painting was there, unchanged yet somehow different. With sunlight illuminating every corner of the room, I approached it with a cup of coffee in hand, determined to examine it up close in better light. The moment my eyes landed on the canvas, I felt an almost magnetic pull, a call that went beyond mere admiration for a piece of art. The landscape was vibrant, full of life, with details so eerily vivid that for a moment I wondered if it could indeed change. Lush trees swaying in an invisible breeze, the small village that seemed to await someone's return, and the sky. A blue so deep it felt like it could swallow anything. With each passing day, the painting became an obsession for me. I couldn't tear myself away from that simple, idyllic view, and yet, beneath the surface, something began to unsettle me. I started to notice small changes, a figure that wasn't there before, a fleeting shadow that seemed to shift a few inches, shape stretching in ways that didn't match the sun's angle in the painting. One evening, after spending hours gazing at it, I noticed something that sent chills down my spine. Among the trees, almost hidden from view, was the silhouette of a person. It wasn't there the day before, I was sure of it. A static, vague figure, but unmistakably human. Who was it? And how was it possible that it only appeared now? The discovery deeply troubled me, so much so that I struggled to sleep that night. The thought that the painting could somehow be alive, that it could change. It was absurd, yet I couldn't deny what my eyes had seen. The next day, armed with a magnifying glass, I decided to examine the painting more closely. The figure was there, motionless, a silent presence among the trees. And as I scrutinized that indistinct face, I felt my breath catch. There was something deeply wrong with this painting, something that went beyond mere paint and canvas. My gaze drifted from the hidden figure to explore the rest of the landscape, searching for other signs, other anomalies. But nothing beyond that solitary figure. I decided I had to talk to someone, share my observations with another art enthusiast. Someone who might understand or, at the very least, not judge me as mad. Little did I know that decision would lead me down a path of darkness and despair, from which there was no return. Chapter 4. The Obsession Grows. My obsession with the painting grew exponentially in the following days. I spent hours in front of that canvas, trying to catch every slight change, every detail I might have missed. My social and professional life began to suffer. Friends complained about my absence, and my work commitments were neglected. But I couldn't look away from that landscape, which now felt menacing. One evening, I decided to share my obsession with a dear friend, also an art enthusiast. I invited him over for a drink, hoping he could offer a rational explanation for what I was experiencing. I showed him the painting, watching his reaction. Initially, he was captivated by the beauty of the work, but then his gaze fixed and his face twisted in an expression of terror. He moved closer to the painting, almost hypnotized, a slight furrow of concern forming on his brow. "You see something odd, don't you?" I asked anxiously. "I don't know," he replied with a trembling voice. "There's something wrong with this painting. The figures, they move." He seemed completely absorbed in the contemplation of the canvas. I left him alone for a moment to prepare a second drink, and when I returned to the room, he was gone. His glass was still half full on the coffee table, as if he had been swallowed into thin air. I called for him, searching every room, but there was no trace of him. Anxiety gripped me. I rushed back to the painting, desperately searching for an answer. But there was nothing, just the countryside landscape that now seemed even more sinister than before. My intuition suggested that the painting held secrets far more disturbing than I had feared so far. The imperceptible changes, the feeling of being watched every time I looked at it. Everything led me to believe in a mystery that extended well beyond the confines of my imagination. The disappearance of my friend was only the beginning. I couldn't explain how it was possible, but I knew the painting had something to do with it. My mind was trapped in a vortex of hypotheses, each more terrifying than the last. I had to find answers, and fast. Chapter 5. New doubts arise. After my friend's unsettling disappearance, the world I knew began to tilt towards an abyss of terror I could have never imagined. The events that followed could have been ripped from a ghastly nightmare, if only I could wake up. One evening I had organized a family dinner, a clumsy attempt to regain some normalcy I felt slipping away. The evening proceeded among forced laughter and concerned glances my relatives exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. We were all distracted by dessert preparations, and nobody paid attention to the moment my cousin left the room. It didn't surprise me. Throughout the evening, he had shown an almost morbid interest in the painting. He seemed detached, lost in thought. Perhaps attracted by that inexplicable call that had also fascinated me. Only when his absence became noticeable did I realize too much time had passed. I went looking for him, my heart racing, hoping to find him simply engrossed in front of the painting. But he wasn't there. The room was empty, the painting still in its disturbing beauty. No trace of my cousin. No sign of struggle or hasty departure. It was as if the earth had swallowed him. I felt myself sinking into an endless nightmare. As a harsh truth dawned on me, the painting had claimed another victim. Desperation mixed with fear as I tried to remain calm in front of the other guests, who began to notice the absence. How could I explain the unexplainable? How could I protect those dear to me from something I couldn't even understand? The answer was simple. I couldn't. I made up an excuse, saying he had received an urgent call and had to leave suddenly. But inside, I knew the truth was much darker. It was clear the painting wasn't just a piece of art. It was a portal, an entity feeding on the souls of those who dared to look too long. And I, in my pride and ignorance, had brought this curse into my home, endangering everyone I loved. Chapter 6. A Bitter Truth. My world had now shrunk to 4 walls beyond which nothing seemed to make sense or matter anymore. My existence, once full of meetings and discoveries, had been reduced to a single obsessive focal point, that damned painting. I had stopped counting the hours spent in front of it, desperately seeking a glimmer of understanding in that sea of colors and shapes that seemed to move, to live on their own. My mind was a battlefield where reason fought in vain against the irrational. The visit of 2 friends, the last tie to a world I was losing, caught me completely off guard. I wasn't expecting anyone. Their presence in my home was like a bolt from the blue, a sudden and unexpected return to reality. They had come driven by friendship, affection, concern for my well-being, unaware of the danger that hovered around me, around us. The evening unfolded on strange ground, suspended between the normalcy of a gathering among friends and the looming shadow of the painting, which, even though not mentioned, exerted an almost tangible pressure on me. The wine flowed, and with it words, memories, smiles. For a brief, enchanting moment, I managed to forget about the painting, to immerse myself in that oasis of normalcy I'd missed so much. But the temptation to share my torment was strong. Yet I resisted. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this nightmare. The distraction, however, didn't come from the usual pretexts, but from something much more powerful: alcohol. The initial euphoria gave way to a heavy drowsiness that enveloped me like a cloak, dragging me into a deep, dreamless sleep. When I awoke, the house was enveloped in silence. My heart raced, my mind still foggy from alcohol. I staggered up, calling for my friends, but no one answered. For a moment, I thought they had left, allowing me to rest, concerned but respectful of my condition. A reassuring, logical thought that soon collided with a far more disturbing reality. On the table, their belongings: a wallet, house keys, a cell phone with a recent missed call. Unmistakable signs they hadn't left of their own volition. I was overcome with terror as my eyes, almost against my will, settled on the painting. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with a malevolent anticipation. There was no need for clues, for rational explanations. The painting had claimed more victims, and I, in my selfishness, in my obsession, had allowed it to happen. Despair turned into rage, into hatred towards myself, towards that work I had brought into my life. But above all, a devastating sense of helplessness. The outside world, reality, everything seemed to fade away, leaving room for a bitter and painful awareness. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Life, as I knew it, was over, and all that remained was the painting, a silent witness to my downfall. Chapter 7. The Temptation. That night, the temptation to gaze upon the painting once more was irresistible, almost like a mysterious call I couldn't, nor wanted to, ignore. Sleep had become a distant memory, and every shadow in my house seemed to whisper to me to approach the painting, to lose myself in its details once again. The disturbing particulars I had noticed in the preceding days, those elusive shapes hiding among the trees and the dimness of the windows, had become an obsession. Their presence in the landscape, once harmless and welcoming, now seemed a dark omen, a veiled threat drawing me deeper into its canvas. My mood teetered between despair and madness. The voices of reason were now a faint whisper, drowned out by the compulsive need to discover, to understand what lay behind those subtle yet terribly significant changes. In a moment of utter despair, I grabbed a kitchen knife from the shelf. The cold, gleaming blade seemed the only means to end this obsession, to free me from this torment. I advanced towards the painting with shaky steps, my heart racing, ready to destroy the source of all my pain. But when the tip of the knife touched the canvas, an invisible, irresistible energy stopped my arm. It was as if a higher force was preventing me from carrying out the act, protecting the painting from any harm. Frustrated and defeated, I fell to the ground, feeling more powerless than ever. Resigned and hopeless, in a last desperate act, I brought the blade to my throat, determined to end my existence rather than continue living in this endless nightmare. Yet, the same force that had protected the painting also prevented this, causing the knife to fall to the ground with a dull clink. The painting, with its secrets and shadows, seemed to mock me, scoff at my inability to escape its influence. I couldn't destroy it, nor could I destroy myself. I was trapped in a limbo of anguish and fear, with no way out. At that moment, a terrifying realization took hold of me. The painting wasn't just a piece of art. It was a prison, a hunter that would never allow its prey to escape. The painting had become a part of me, a dark reflection of the soul that I could neither accept nor reject. Chapter 8. The Abyss. The nights became endless. Exhaustion oppressed me, but the call of the painting was too strong, an obsession that dug ever deeper into my psyche, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. Night after night, the changes in the painted landscape became more evident, more disturbing. The elusive figures that once hid in the shadows now seemed to move with purpose, outlining contours ever more familiar. Yet the revelation of who they exactly were remained a constant torment, a question without an answer that consumed me. But the answer to this question didn't delay. The boundary between reality and nightmare began to shatter. The figures in the painting, once simple blots of color, now bore the traits of familiar faces, of loved ones disappeared without a trace. Desperation grew until it became unbearable. I found myself talking to the painting, pleading with it, threatening it, a silent dialogue in a vortex of madness. My words were lost in the echo of the empty room, answered only by silence. Why? I screamed at it one night, my voice broken by anguish. Why them? Why me? The painting didn't respond, but the answers were there, hidden in the details I could no longer ignore. The figures in the painting were not mere artistic representations. They were prisoners, souls captured by that cursed work and condemned to live eternally in that unchangeable landscape. The realization hit me like a punch in the stomach. My friends, my loved ones, were there, trapped, doomed to an existence of silent torment, and I was the last witness to their disappearance. Chapter 9. The Final Glimpse. I stood at the center of the room, enveloped by a darkness that seemed to mirror the turmoil of my soul, an inner hell fueled by regrets and lost memories. Every fragment of happiness experienced before the arrival of that cursed painting haunted me, eliciting a sense of loss so profound it left me breathless. My life, once full of vibrant colors, had been reduced to a gray and dull shadow, devoid of any nuance. The need to cast a final glance at the painting became irresistible, a force pushing me towards the abyss, eager to face my fate. As my eyes settled on the canvas, the pain of what I had lost intertwined with my suffering, creating a vortex of emotions that overwhelmed me. And then I saw it, a detail I had overlooked, an echo of my now lost existence. In the distance, a house identical to mine dominated the landscape, and at a window, a figure all too familiar to me stared back, with an expression of pure terror. My heart stopped. I brought the magnifying glass closer to the canvas, and the reality of what I saw hit me with the force of a punch in the stomach. That figure was me, trapped in an eternal moment of despair, a perfect replica of my deepest self. In a panic, I rushed to the room's window, desperately hoping to find the familiar chaos of the city. But the world beyond the glass had transformed. It was no longer the same as before. What I saw was a countryside landscape, the same landscape depicted by the painting, with a precision that defied all logic. A shiver of terror ran down my spine. Suddenly, the harsh reality crashed against my being with unprecedented force. I had become part of the painting. A scream of despair tore from my throat, but no sound emerged. Only silence. The awareness of my new reality was a prison from which there was no escape, a fate marked by ink and color, by madness and despair, where every hope